Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. I am sitting a little differently today. Normally, I kind of zoom in a bit more, but I'm doing something special today because it's my birthday. It's my big 4-0. Yes, my favorite gift. So I've decided to do a sprawling 40 books that define me, meaning 40 books for every year of my life. I will tell you now, spoiler alert, there are more than 40 books mentioned for sure. Sometimes these books are related to, my own writing in the sense of inspiring techniques or concepts, but mainly it's books that meant something to me at the age that I read them, thereabouts. I kind of had to, I knew some were kind of generalized. I'm like, I was either 12 or 13 when I read this, and others I was like, maybe 25, I don't know. So I had to kind of go through my Goodreads and see when I reviewed stuff. But anyway, I'm not going to ramble about that because I'm going to be rambling long enough today. So in the latter years, though, I'm going to kind of just be recommending books that I've read recently. So it's like a mixed bag, a big mixed bag. And also, yes, I'm bringing back chandelier earrings. Someone told me that they're like out of style, but I'm like, I've always loved them. It proves how old I am. I'm like going to just stick with the trends of my youth. So here we go. So for the first 5 years of my life, I've picked books that I have memories of. Just for a couple, I'm not going to do a whole bunch of kids' books around, 5 years. I kind of just jump forward a bit, but I just wanted to show a few that might bring nostalgia to you if you're older, or if maybe you are thinking of having kids or have kids, might, consider getting these. So the first one is Madeline's Rescue. I have it in my house somewhere. My kids have taken it, I think. I don't know where the heck it went, but this is about a little girl. She lives in like a convent, I guess, because I think it's wartime. Anyway, so because she has a dad, but anyway, one of those situations. And then she's just like this feisty little thing. And this one, I think, started my love of dogs, and tough little girls. And I just love Madeline. There's another one called Madeline and the Bad Hat that we have as well. And there's 3 or 4 other ones, I think, in the series. But Madeline's Rescue is always my favorite. And then we have The Mitten. I don't know if you guys have heard of this one. So this one, I think I was actually an older kid when I read it, but I've always really loved the art in the book. It has some really cool, so it'll have like a page like this, but then it has pictures kind of leading up to what's happening in the next page on the sides. And I always thought it was really neat, and I always really liked the story. I thought it was really cute. It's just about a kid that loses his mitten and a bunch of animals like live in it. It's clearly a book for children, but my kids love it. Another one, and this one actually isn't one that I read as a kid, but it's one that I read to my kids, and I really love it. I love trains, obviously, but it also reminds me of when my husband and I drove twice from Ontario to Arizona, because we followed kind of a similar track. We didn't get all the way to the coast, but there's recognizable landmarks in this book that we've driven through, and I thought that was really fun. It's also like a poem, and I really like reading poems. So 2 little trains, and the art is okay, but it's really kind of the story. It's just very fun. It's got a lot of like kind of shorter passages, but kind of fun. The kids like to run their fingers along the tracks, So if you have kids, I highly recommend this one. It's a nice little quick one too, if you want a quick book and not one that takes 40 years. Speaking of books that take 40 years to read to your kids, which is fine. I mean, I love reading to my kids. I don't mind. I don't understand the parents. They're like, I hate reading to my kids. I'm like, but they're only going to want you to read to them for a little bit. Like my 7-year-old now is already reading chapter books, and she doesn't really want us to read stories to her anymore. She wants to read them to us. Well, that takes forever. Anyway, so of course I've got the Berenstain Bears. I'm not going to talk about that weird Mandela effect thing, but anyway, so I have like 40 of them. You probably recognize some of these titles. I loved these as a kid. I absolutely loved them. And you know what? They still stand up. There's nothing kind of problematic about them. In fact, for their time that they were written, they were pretty progressive. I will say, there is an interesting thing that I learned. So sometimes if you're looking for Berenstain Bears books at used bookstores or like yard sales and stuff, you'll stumble across these kind of ones that are very religious. And you're like, what? I didn't realize they were religious. But no, apparently, I think the son of the kids, he made his he made an offshoot company, and they allowed him to do this that was specifically religious. So it's wild, because I always had to make sure, I'm like, is this one of those religious ones? I mean, nothing towards people that are religious, but I'm not religious. I'm like, I don't need my kids reading that. So I kind of avoid those ones. But yeah, I always thought that's really interesting. I had to look it up the one time, because I was like, I don't remember them being so religious. Anyway, of all of them, my favorite was Double Dare. I don't have it. My kids keep getting it from the library, though. So let me know if you read Berenstain Bears as a kid, which one your favorite was. Yeah, Double Dare, and I think Moving Day and Weekend at Grandma's were always my favorites. Okay, I'm jumping forward a bit here because no one wants me to list off a bunch of board books again. So one that really, really impacted me as a kid was Ghost Twins. I would love to find these for my daughter. I think they're probably age 8 to 10-year-old books, I think. I can't remember because I didn't keep them. I should have kept them. So I believe that this series is what really got me hooked on ghosts. And I mean, a lot of people love ghosts. Obviously, that's why they're such an important part of our culture. But I really love goats. Goats are great too, but I love ghosts. I actually wrote a novella that no one wants to publish. It's too weird. It's like a cozy paranormal mystery romance about a 40-year-old woman falling in love with a ghost. Yeah. Anyway. Core memory here. Yeah, so I loved this series. I actually have this one. So when I was 6, this is more like 8 or 9, but again, I'm not going to show you a bunch of board books. I loved this book called The Wishing Tree. I clearly read it so much that the cover fell off. It's by Ruth Chu, and it's just about these two kids that they find this like portal into like another dimension in like the park, and it's creepy and spooky and very like atmospherically melancholy, but it's really interesting. I really loved it, and I can't wait for my daughter to be just like a little bit older to read it because she's kind of a scaredy cat. Now, there are 2 series that I loved around grade 4. I mean, I said 7 here, but, close enough. One was The Babysitter's Club. I really wanted to be Christy, but I am probably more a Marianne. I remember that these books were the first ones I read where racism was introduced, and I remember being absolutely floored by the injustice that, I think it was Jessie, right? I can't remember. I think so? Stacy? Jessie? I can't remember. One of them kind of is... is treated really poorly by this family because they're black and the family is white. And I was like, just like, what? This happens? And like, I was so happy when her friends stuck up for her. And that I think was a really, almost like a important message for me as a child to like, because I grew up in a very white community. I didn't have a lot of people of color in my community at all until even high school. We barely had. I think I can list off the 10 people. So that actually was, I think that's why kids' books are so important. It's so important that kids read because they get introduced to things that they might not, witness in their lives depending on where they live. And so that one has stuck with me because it was such an important, I think, part of shaping my identity as a person who considers themselves an ally to people that, are marginalized. And the other series that I was obsessed with when I was younger was, of course, Goosebumps. I, of course, kept a bunch of them. The Ghost Next Door was my absolute favorite. The Haunted Mask still haunts me. I think everyone who has read The Haunted Mask or watched that weird show, is haunted by it. But, yeah, I loved this one so much because the twist was so good in this one. Yeah, I think I kept 8 or 9 of them. And again, my daughter's almost ready. But again, she's scaredy, so I don't know if she will. Next, I put this as 8, but it was more like 10. Now, this is a coming-of-age book, a first kiss book. Ooh. And this one is, of course, about a girl who meets a ghost. Geez, I have a ghost kink or something. Anyway, I think I'm going to psychoanalyze myself here. I think because all these ghost books kind of were around the same age. I think around 9 and 10 when I was reading these. So my Oma, who was really, really close to my grandma, she died when I was 9. And this was the same year that my parents divorced. So maybe I developed this ghost thing because of these losses. We learn this stuff today. Anyway, so this book is called A Taste of Smoke. It's probably terrible. I mean, the girl in this is 13, but I think I read it, when I was 9. But it's also a really good kind of like fun little mystery too. And it just has like a little first smooch in it. It's really cute. Let's move on to traumatizing books I read when in my youth. So obviously, Where the Red Fern Grows, Charlotte's Web, Old Yeller. I started reading Charlotte's Web kind of with my daughter, but I'm going to wait on the other 2. In fact, I might be like, never read these. These books, though, definitely made me love animals, probably because I was horrified by what happens to the animals in these books, even though it is based on like reality. And I think that's the actually important thing about traumatizing books is that they sometimes do show you reality that you're not exposed to. Like when I was growing up, we only had cats. We didn't have dogs. And my cats, we got them when I was a kid, so they didn't pass until I was in my early 20s. So like I never really experienced, other than my hamster, I guess, I never really experienced like pets dying. And so this for me was a way to kind of experience that. And I think, those kind of things can prepare kids for, when they're older and having to suffer through the loss of an animal. So next I have 2 books that I kind of was read to me, or, I don't remember if I read this. I know I read like an abridged version as a child, and that was Little Women. I loved this because I have 2 sisters, and so I really understood like the dynamics between the sisters, how you can like really hate somebody one day, but also really love them. And so, yeah, this book was instrumental, I think, for me in like kind of introducing me to like older literature. I read a lot of abridged classics as a kid because I was a real dork. And then my dad read this to me, Watership Down. I've mentioned this before on my channel. When I was, about 10, he had to explain some of it to me. And there was some scary stuff, that he kind of, when the animals fight and stuff. But I've read this book probably 5 or 6 times in my life. I need to reread it. But yeah, don't let the cute bunny fool you. Now, when I was 11, I'm pretty sure I was 11 or 12, there was a book that sticks in my mind because it was one of the first epistolary novels I really recall reading. This is, a book set as like a journal, and the whole thing was a journal. It was called Absolutely Normal Chaos. Can't remember the author. I really identified with the main character, and my best friend at the time, we broke away from being friends, had the book. I lent it to her, and I never got it back. Amanda, give it back. Anyway, I just like that book was really kind of, it was one of the first books I kind of read that dealt with stuff that I was going through at my age. And so it's kind of like a puberty book. I don't know. Probably sucks now, but who knows? It might be good. Now, moving on to age 12, I have 2 here that I read much too young, probably. I obviously didn't read this version. I got this as a gift, but Jurassic Park. Yeah, I got this fancy one as a gift for Christmas a couple years ago. It's got pictures inside. It's kind of neat. Anyway, so I read this. It was my first book I read that had swearing in it. I was around 12. I actually had a bookmark. It was a piece of cardboard, and I checked off all the swears. Like every time they said shit or damn, I would like check it off. And then we have The Shining, because as soon as I, read Jurassic Park, I started scouring my dad's bookshelves for older books, and this one was probably on it. This is probably his copy. Yeah, looks like it's now an ABC TV miniseries. I don't think this is the copy that I read, because this seems to be... Oh, I even checked, actually it might have been, because I checked off all the books that I read inside. Anyway, yeah, The Shining, of course, is an instrumental book in my, move into reading horror. I couldn't sleep for weeks because of this book. There's so much sex stuff in this book that went over my head that when I read it later as an adult, I was like, oh my God. Anyway, that shows that, kids can read stuff and just not even know what's going on. Now, here's an interesting one for age 13. Might have been 12, too. I can't believe I found this. I was like scoring my shelves, and I was like, oh my God, there it is. So I kept this book because I kept this book because it was what got me started on my own writing path. In truth, I hated the ending of this very kind of generic fantasy book. And I decided I would write my own ending. Since then, I have never stopped writing. On top of my 4, self-published books, I've written 5 more novels. One of them is a 6-book fantasy series, so more like 10 more novels, and like 40 or 50, fan fiction, short story novellas. I'm in a bit of a slump right now, but I've got 2 books kind of on the go. I've got this like romance book about like enemies to lovers trivia team, and I'm inspired by the trivia that I do with my friends. I thought it was really fun. I don't know. Sometimes I like writing romance. And then I also have this historical fiction mystery that I'm working on too. But yeah, I need the time, but I don't have a lot of time. Now, when I was 14, I started moving into books that were kind of like about kind of people's like going through tough times, I think, because I kind of identified with that. And so I had this one called From One Experience to Another, which is a bunch of like authors, and it's just like short stories, and most of them deal with kind of people like teenagers dealing with stuff. And so I found that was really kind of helpful to me. There's a lot too about like girls kind of overcoming sexism and stuff in this book too, and it's got some sci-fi books stories in it too, which is interesting. So it kind of like was an interesting kind of way to introduce me into short stories, because I don't think I really read much before then. Now we have a book that was very instrumental in keeping my sanity during tough times in my life, and that was Dragonlance. I still have like 30 of these. At one point, I probably had about 70 of them. I was obsessed with Dragonlance. I have mentioned Dragonlance many times on my channel, but this is the first one. I wish I had the original covers. I really don't like these covers, but whatever, because I got them from the library like 1,000 times. So Dragonlance is a high fantasy series. It's D&D is based on it, or it's based on D&D. I can't remember, but yeah, they're fun. I really like Dragonlance still. They're very like they're good for teenagers. They're not YA, but they're approachable for teens, and you can also read them as an adult and totally enjoy them. And then we have the ones that I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I loved, but I actually really loved Sweet Valley books when I was a teenager. I think because I was a teenager, I was 16, and probably when I was reading these, and I would read them interspersed with other books, but I really loved these ones. I kept them. I didn't keep any other Sweet Valley books. These are the sagas. Want to see something spicy? Oh, this isn't the spicy one. If you open the flap, there's a shirtless dude. Oh my god. Yeah, so these were like historical fiction, and they started in like the 1750s or 1800s. Yeah, 1825 for this one, and it follows like 4 or 5 generations leading up to like the main characters in the 90s when the books were written. And I just loved that idea. And these books really got me to historical fiction, I think, because I never really read much historical fiction as like it's not really something you read as like a teenager. So I don't think anyway. So yeah, I really kind of thank these books for that. And I kept them because I was like, maybe my kids will want to read them one day. And they're kind of saucy. Like there's no sex in them, but like there's references to it. And you know, there's like the French Revolution and stuff like that. Now we're moving into books more for adults. So one that my dad was instrumental in getting me into was Ender's Game. I don't know where it is. Because I read his copy, he probably kept it, and I don't have a copy. No, because I let my husband read it. Did I lend it to someone else? I might have lent it to somebody and they kept it on me. But anyway, Ender's Game was a big one that I really loved. And I also love Dune. It fell apart. I did a review of Dune when the movie came out a couple of years ago. I'll put the link down or I'll put it as like the video at the end of this. Yeah, it was like me kind of critiquing it a bit, but also like explaining what I really like about it. So, I mean, it's an old classic book. It's from the 70s. It's going to have some stuff that's problematic. Anyway, this is a brutal copy. It's a terrible copy. Also, it fell apart. I need a new copy. Now, we're at age 18. Oh my God, I'm not even halfway through here yet. So this was when I went to university. And I was introduced, I took, of course, English literature, because what else do you take when you don't know what you're doing with your life? And it introduced me to a whole slew of genres and books that I never would have picked up on my own. One of those I'm so thankful for is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I was so I was so unknowledgeable about like British literature at the time that I thought North and South was talking about like the America, like American North and South. No, it's about Britain. And so after I read this book, I devoured it. I love Elizabeth Gaskell. I need to read more of her stuff. I've read 3 or 4 of her novels. I've got one, Cranford, I think I'm going to try to read this summer because I need to read more of the old stuff. But yeah, so I love North and South. If you love Enemies to Lovers, like that, this thing started on in Enemies to Lovers, at least for me. So. And then we're moving into when I was 19, I took a genre class, and the professor was this old quirky dude, and he would just like ramble on and on about the sci-fi books that he loves. And I went after class to ask him a question one time, and we started talking about Neuromancer, and he convinced me to read it. And yeah, I loved it, of course. And what was really important about, like, I mean, I don't think I've read it since, but I really enjoyed it. I really love the idea. I love how weird it was. And what it did too is what has inspired me to write my own kind of cyberpunky story. And it was about this female bounty hunter assassin. It's trash. But I did end up writing. So at the time, I also was obsessed with T.S. Eliot. Because I'm a dork. It's like Neuromancer and The Wasteland. Anyway, I was obsessed with The Wasteland. So one night, because I have no friends, I'm kidding. It's because I was like 19, and I was in my room in my basement, and I decided to stay up till 5 in the morning, and I wrote this like entire chapter of this book, but the entire thing is based like I am on The Wasteland, and complete with like all these references. I tried to read it like a few weeks ago because I was like, I should look at my poetry and see if it sucks, and I was just like, this is incomprehensible. But I just remember being so proud that I like made this like really wild and to me like very like deep poem. And so yeah, I thank Neuromancer for that. Next we have another book that I read in my university days, and that was Mrs. Dalloway. Yeah, the university got me interested in Virginia Woolf, of course. That's kind of what university is for. And yeah, I loved this. I love stream of consciousness because of this. I had never really encountered that before, and it really got me into literature that was a little different. That was, not deliberately obtuse, but, a bit more complex than just like, no offense, Dragonlance. And then when I was 21, it was my last year of university, and I took a British literature course again, and it was about poetry, and it was with my favorite professor that I had a super crush on. And we read Auden, and I just fell in love with his stuff. I absolutely love Auden. The Shield of Achilles is such a great poem. The Musée de Beaux-Arts is one of my favorite poems of all time. I actually wrote, writing. I wrote a novel I don't know if it's good or not. I keep going back and trying to edit it, and then I get like bored of editing it. So I'm like, it must suck if I can't get through it. But it's like 180,000 words, so it's long. I need to trim it out, and it's about this. The whole thing, each chapter is loosely based thematically on. Oh, there it is on Autumn's quest. See, I marked it up. So the quest is like a sonnet sequence, not sonnet, but was it a sonnet? Anyway, a poem sequence. And each kind of poem stands on its own, but they're all connected. And so I kind of based the novel on the chapters of the novel on the themes in these stories because I'm a dork. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that book. Probably nothing. And then we move into a book that I read in like 2 weeks. And by book, I mean the whole series. And that was The Gunslinger, The Dark Tower. So, yep, love The Dark Tower. It's great. I have really only read it through once, though I have read the Wastelands book, I think 4 times. It was my favorite one. I have all these. I have the fancy editions. I keep finding them at used bookstores and stuff. So I eventually got, I think I have the whole collection. Yes, I have the whole collection in fancy picture versions. So that's cool. Someday I'll read it again. When I was 23 or so, stumbled across this bad boy, Aliens vs. Predator Prey, and this got me obsessed with Alien vs. Predator. Alien vs. Predator is like a fandom that I just am like, I just can't break away from it. I love it. I have watched all the movies like a billion times, except Predator 2. And I'm not as much, I love Alien, but I'm not as much into Alien as I'm into Predator. Like, Alien vs. Predator is in my top 5 movies. Did you watch the Killer vs. Killers one, the new one that just came out? Honestly, it was so much fun. I absolutely loved it. But then again, I'm one of those people that will love anything that they produce. You know, they make a Predator movie, I'm going to watch it. Yeah, so I'm also really excited for that Alien show that's coming out too. And I'm really excited for the new Predator movie. It looks awesome. So yeah, I'm just like very obsessed with Alien vs. Predator. And this book kind of started me on that because I'd watched them when I was younger, of course, but like this book got me really into like the kind of the idea of the culture behind the Predators and stuff. And so yeah, anyway, I'm not going to talk about AVP anymore. And then because I had read this, I kind of got reading more and more classic sci-fi here and there. It's kind of when I started collecting my massive stack. You can't really see it, but it's over here. I've mentioned this before. There's like 3 shelves double stacked of like quadruple stacked actually, because I've got 2 on top of each other, of classic sci-fi that I think that they're such an important, not important even like they're just like a relic of their time. Like we don't make books like this anymore. And because most of them aren't put into like digital, when they're gone. So I like kind of saving them from like their fate. And what got me started on this was Star Rigger. This book series is so fun. It's about a guy who's a space transport truck driver. The world building is just like a blast, and it's so funny. Like it's not super serious, and there's tons of cool aliens, and it's just the idea of like a space transport truck to me is ridiculous, and I love it. Like it's so fun. Anyway, yeah, so that got me started on my whole classic sci-fi. As you know, I do my classic sci-fi bingo and stuff videos about once a month. So yeah. Then when I was 25 or so, I read this bad boy, House of Leaves. And yeah, I mean, you've heard of this book. If you've read it and didn't like it, that's fine. If you've read it and loved it, I feel you. If you haven't read it yet, it is fun. It's so interesting. It's so weird. It's got like words in weird spots, and this version has like color. It's got pages like this. Like it's just very much a kind of very experimental novel, and I really love books that kind of play with format, as long as the formatting kind of suits what's going on. With this book it makes sense because it's kind of like a maze and like a labyrinth and like this weird chasm room, and so when you're reading these, you're having to like turn the book to read it and stuff. It kind of makes you feel like you're immersed in this maze that the characters are in, and so I really love that kind of concept. So I really loved House of Leaves for that. It got me really into kind of more kind of obscure books, and I'm going to mention a few of them at the end of this video if it ever ends. When I was 26, so this is when I started going through my Goodreads and being like, what did I read that year, and looking at me like, oh yeah, these ones were my favorites. I'm not going to talk about what these are, but I'm going to say when I was 26, the books that I liked the most that I read were Cloud Atlas, Possession by A.S. Byatt, and The Master and Margarita, which is an amazing book. It is so funny. I read this book when I was in Cuba, I remember, and that's why it's kind of like waterlogged. I like read it like in one day on the beach. Didn't talk to anybody all day. That's fine. That's what you should do on vacation, in my opinion. I've got too many of these. I gotta move on. Then when I was 27, I wandered into the world of Tanya Huff. I've mentioned her on my channel before. This is not the first book in the series, but it is my favorite one. And it's about this woman. See her there. She is a sergeant in the space army, and there's a whole bunch of aliens and stuff. It's really funny. It's really like kind of spicy at times, and not spicy like a romance, but just like it's got like kind of like funny jokes and stuff in it, and it's also got a really great action. I really recommend this series, the Confederation series, and so that I started reading that at that age. So when I was 27, I also read This Beast Battle Royale, which if you've seen the movie, it's great. If you read the book, it's fantastic. It's translated from Japanese. And then I also read this bad boy when I was 27, Dahlgren by Samuel Delany. He is a sci-fi master. You should totally check him out if you have not. Perhaps don't start with this one. Start with Babel, start with Nova. Even Fall of the Towers is fine. I mean, it is kind of classic, his style, so you have to kind of get used to that. They're very intellectual, and this book is like, it's intense. I can't even tell you what it's about because it's very strange. Okay, then when I was 28, I read two books that I went through a real phase in my late 20s of going back. I guess I was still kind of carrying on from my university years of reading kind of classics and stuff. And so I had never read Hemingway, and I guess I'd heard of him and was like, I'll give him a try. And I really love A Farewell to Arms. This book made me bawl my eyes out. People think that Hemingway is like this like tough manly man that has like no feelings, but his books are all about feeling. It's just his style is just very like kind of like almost like didactic, and so it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition of how he tells stories versus like the ideas behind them. And no, this book's fantastic. And then do the obscure. I can't tell you the trigger warning for this book because it would spoil the most wildest and awful twist I've ever read in my entire life. Yes, this book from the 1890s or something has like the wildest twist in the entire world. A twist that you're like, I was like, what? Like I had to go back and like reread it and be like, and I was a wreck. I was an absolute wreck. I'm very glad I didn't read this book when I had children. I'll just tell you that. I don't think I could ever read it again. What's next? So when I was 29, two very different books. I found one of my favorite classic sci-fis, and that is Jade Darcy and the Affair of Honor. It's about this female bounty hunter, and it's just so much fun. I just love this book. And I read Longbourn, was one of my favorite books when I was 29? Yeah, it's an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, which I didn't mention as one of my favorite books, but it is one of my favorite books. When I was 30, I didn't really have a ton of books that I loved, so I will show you We the Drowned, which is a historical fiction that's multi-generational. I think it is, where is it? It's in Denmark, and it's written by a Danish author. It's really, really interesting. There is a disturbing part about a dog at one point, which was sad, but the rest of the book was really, really good. Ooh. When I was 31, I tackled a book that I had been meaning to read for years, and I read the whole thing, and I liked it. I loved the last section the most. And I'm not talking about Infinite Jest. I have read that too, but I just think that book is a ego-driven drivel at times. But anyway, I'm talking about Ulysses. This is a fancy version. My friend's grandfather died, I guess, and she was like, I have a bunch of old books. Do you want them? I'm like, yes. And so she gave me this really cool, like, gold-edged version of Ulysses. And this is the version I read, and I thought it was really, really, really good. And I really, really enjoyed it. So it's just, it's hard. Like, it's complicated, and there's a lot of kind of stuff you have to kind of, like, research and look up. It almost would be a good book to read on, like, an ebook, but then you'd miss all the kind of interesting kind of like formatting and stuff. So I don't know, read it with like a guide beside you if you don't know a lot about kind of Irish history, which I know a little bit because I took that course, but I didn't know enough, so I definitely had to look stuff up. Now this book, when in 2017, when I was 32, this book means a lot to me, not because I love the book too much, but because it was the book I read when I had my daughter. I remember I gave birth to my daughter, and the next day I was reading this book while I was feeding her for one of the first times. And this book, not a very good book to read when you've just had a baby. But so that's why this book will always kind of stick out in my mind, because it just reminds me of that. And I mean, that's a pretty important moment of my life. That's that. Also, it's a really good book. Then after that, we've got, when I was 32, I guess, I went back to work, and I had to take the the Greyhound to work because of the transit in my area of the world is absolutely crazy. Anyway, so I was reading a lot of books on the bus, and one of them I read was Nora Crystal Tears, which is by Alan Dean Foster. This book got me obsessed with Alan Dean Foster, and I love his stuff. I love the world he's created. I just, if you haven't read any of his stuff, it's so much fun. And you don't really have to read it in order. He has this Pip and Flink series about this guy and his little pet dragon, and it's sci-fi. The dragon's like an alien dragon. But I really like this one. This is like a kind of like a prequel to that series. And then there's one called Phylogenesis, which is the start of a trilogy. That one's really fun too. And I also read this in when I was 33, Old Rendering Plant. This book is so weird. If you like weird old literature, I highly recommend this one. I recommended this book to my brother-in-law because he trusts my judgment, and normally I recommend stuff that he really, really likes. And I told him to read this, and he was like, "That book was such trash," and I was like, "No, it's not." And we had a big argument about it. So it makes me laugh because I just think that's so funny. So when I was 34, there were a lot of books I really liked when I read that year, but the one that really sticks in my mind is Space Captain Smith. I've mentioned these books before on my channel. They're just really fun, like sci-fi kind of romp comedies, and they're really, really fun. And so I love the whole series, and so it's just, I can't not talk about Space Captain Smith. And then when I was 35, I had another child, and the book that kind of reminds me of her is The Jealousy of Jalis. This book I really, really, really enjoyed, and I love the second book even more. But I remember this one. I will always remember this one because I read it while it was an ARC, and I read it while I was in the hospital because she had jaundice, and she was like in the little incubator thing, and that was the book that I read when I was dying of crazy hormones flying around in the hospital. It was also COVID. And another book that was really important to me this year was my third baby, and that is What Branches Grow. This is my own book. This is my post-apocalyptic novel. It's kind of an ode to the genre. It has flavors of like older stuff. It has flavors of Fallout because I love the game Fallout. And so I mean, if you haven't read this yet, I recommend it, I guess. It actually won 2 awards. It won this. It was a finalist in this Kindle Book Awards thing, and then it also was a semi-finalist in the SPSFC, the first one. So that's pretty cool. I don't have a sticker on this book because I haven't printed them yet. But so it's dark though, just warning you there. The next year, because when I was on mat leave with my daughter, she would only sleep on me. And so what I did was I'd have her here, actually, literally, and I would type. And because I wrote a book. I wrote a trilogy. And so the book for when I was 36 was Escaping First Contact. This is my sci-fi kind of romp. It's kind of a comedy more than anything, but it's not a comedy. It's an adventure. It's a space adventure with comedy. It has wacky characters. It's pretty queer too. And I just I really had a lot of fun writing these. I had so much fun because I just kind of I was originally going to write them, like self-publish them and then write them under like another name and just kind of make them as kind of weird and wacky as possible. And I was like, why don't I just write under my own name? So I kind of just went with it. I didn't really care kind of with What Branches Grow. I toned things down. I mean, it might not seem like it, but I toned things down. I kind of made things a bit more palatable, I guess. With this one, I was like, do what I want. So yeah, if you like space opera and don't mind a bunch of weird stuff, it's I think it's fun. And getting close. Also when I was 36, there were 2 other books that were instrumental to my life, and one was The Hollow Places. I listened to this on Audible, and it really got me back into reading horror. Up to that point, I hadn't really read a horror. It's like I read it up to I was probably in university, and then I kind of stopped reading it, and I didn't read it again for 10 years. And so this book really got me back into it. And I also started reading Proust. You can find my little reviews of Proust on my channel. I kind of stopped. I think I was in the middle of the 5th book. I was just getting so fed up with the narrator. He's such a little prick. Anyway, so they are really, really good though. There's a reason why these are they stand the test of time. Because they're just interesting. Despite there being about almost nothing, they're just very interesting. Anyway, I need to finish that, and I will someday. For 2022, so when I was 37, my favorite book of the year was Under Fortunate Stars, which is a really cool kind of timey travel space opera. I really liked it. It's really fun. I highly recommend it. My favorite books of 2023, I don't have any of them in physical copy, was Children of Time, which got me into Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is great. Feed Them Silence by Lee Mandello, which was a novella about a woman who transplants her brain into a wolf or connects with a wolf. I can't remember, but I really liked it. And also The Crew, which is a fantasy comedy, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, it inspired me to start writing my own kind of fantasy romp. I've only got 3 chapters in, so it's not really that great yet. We'll see if anything becomes of it. But I was like, I could write a funny comedy. And for 2024, when I was 39, there's so many books that I read last year that I really loved. I'm just going to throw out 4 of them for you here just because why not? I might as well recommend them. You can find the reviews on my channel. The Ministry of Time, you've probably heard of this one. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. I really like kind of fish out of water stories, and I really loved the concept. My Darling Dreadful Thing. Horror, very interesting, very cool kind of concept. One of those, is she crazy or is she seeing a ghost situations, and we don't really know. And that's kind of the fun part of the book. It's really well done. And then Asunder was my favorite book I read last year. It's just a fantasy novel about a woman. She's got magic, and there's a man dying, and she takes his essence into her body to transport him back home. And it's got a really good world building and a really great kind of atmosphere, and really just some really interesting kind of magic. And Grey Dog, which is a historical fiction horror, and it's just really immersive and really smart. And it's by a Canadian small press too, which is what I like. So yeah, these are all of the books that kind of shaped my life the last 40 years. It's funny because while I was preparing this, because obviously I prepared it ahead of time, I didn't just prepare it on a whim. I was gathering all the books, and I kept seeing more books on my shelves that I was like, I didn't talk about that one. I didn't talk about that one. I didn't talk about that one. So I've got a few more for you. I'm not going to explain what they are, but these are books. So these are all really weird books. Really weird books I read generally in my 20s, and I haven't read them again, and so I don't know if they still stand up, but I'm just going to throw them at you and let me know if you've read them too. So one of them is Confederacy of Dunces. You might have heard of this. The author, he actually died. I think he committed suicide, and then his mom published this after he died, and it's just a really interesting book about a very strange man. The Monk by Matthew Lewis. This book is messed up. It's so weird. It's crazy, especially for a book written in, when was it written? The 1830s or something? I can't remember, but yeah, it's crazy, this book. The Sinking of Odridic Stadium. This book is very odd. I really enjoyed it because it's just so strange. It's about a man writing letters to his wife. His wife barely speaks English, though, so they don't understand each other half the time. And it's just so strange. You're like, what's going on? Remainder is about a man he wins the lottery. No, he somehow comes into some money, and he's obsessed with recreating this exact moment in his life. And I can't remember why, but it's he's just really, so he hires all these actors, and he keeps tweaking what they're doing. And he's you must be frying these onions in your pan at exactly this time as I walk down the hallway, and weird stuff like that. It's very interesting. And then Wittgenstein's Mistress. This is just, it's a woman who's convinced that she's the last person on earth. And you're is she crazy or is this true? And it's wild. And so if you like kind of experimental literature, this one's up there. I read this book, You Shall Know Our Velocity by Dave Eggers. He's kind of taken off lately, and I haven't really liked his new stuff, but this book was it's a travel book of him and his friend trying to travel around the world, and they just kind of suck at it. But it's very much a youth book. I read it when I was in university, and I really identified with it at the time because they were around the same age, and it's kind of one of those finding yourself stories. And so yeah, I have no idea if it still holds up, but I really loved it at the time. This book, I don't think it stands up anymore, but I read it in my early 20s, and I read it probably 5 times. This is Geek Love. You might have heard of this too. It's about a family of, carnies, and just their kind of weird dynamic. It's also about fascism. It's just very strange. I think that it probably has a lot of ableist stuff in it nowadays, even though I don't think it was intended to be, a disparaging. It's just times change. I have not read this for a long time. I wonder if I should. And one more. This book, Observatory Mansions by Edward Carey, is just about a bunch of weirdos living in an apartment building. And it's just very strange, and I really loved it back in the day. Again, I haven't read it probably in 15 years, and I don't know if it stands up. I don't know if I should do like a reread of all these books, be like, do I still like these books after all these years? But I also don't want to, because I'm like, what if I read it and I'm like, this book sucks? And it throws off my my nostalgia. Yeah, anyways, and I've got this huge stack of books I have to put away, and this was a very long video, but I wanted to like talk about all these books that I really love, and I'm looking at my shelves, and like I've mentioned this before, these are not my only shelves. I've got 2 other shelves on the other side of the room, and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, oh, I could have talked about that, I could have talked about that. I didn't even talk about The Sound and the Fury, I don't think, which is a book that inspired the name of this channel, as well as, the Macbeth, the whole idea behind it. Like, that's just me, I'm always Sound and Fury, signifying nothing, because I like to ramble on and on. Anyway, happy birthday to me, and I hope you enjoyed this big old stack of books. Thanks.